Without further ado, let's begin day 2 of GYSS. We will kick off the first plenary session of the day with a talk by Prof Leslie Valiant on what is humanity's distinguishing capability. The Q&A session will be moderated by Prof Ernest Chong from the Singapore University of Technology and Design. Prof, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. So thank you all for coming on this very rainy day. So what I'm discussing today, I'm going to talk about humans and machines in the same breath. And the license to discuss humans and machines was given to us a long time ago by Alan Turing, who even at the time when computers just appeared, was already asking, can every task done by humans be also done by a machine? And he answered this in a radio broadcast in 1951, where he said that when one discusses this question, it's customary to offer a grain of comfort in the form of a statement that some particularly human characteristic could never be imitated by a machine. People want some reassurance that we are essential. He said it might, for instance, be said that no machine could write good English, or that it could not be influenced by sex appeal or smoke a pipe. But then he answered this by saying, I cannot offer any such comfort, for I believe that no such bounds can be set. So he did believe that everything we can do can also be done by a machine. And this wasn't just an opinion. This was based on science. The Church-Turing thesis, which is well known to those of you who do computer science, which says that every process in the universe which we believe is mechanical can also be simulated by a Turing machine or a standard computer. Now, simulating human-like behavior by machine took a long time. So what was the hold-up? Well, the hold-up, which is still unsettled science, is, well, what is it that humans do? Machines may do everything we can do, but what is it that we do? So, so here the questions are to specify human capabilities. You know, what is it that we do which we may want to simulate by computer? And also, if we answer this, we may find out about ourselves. And the complementary question is, how would you realize this by an algorithm, whether in human brains or machines? Now, the history of AI is really a search for these capabilities. Early on, so one capability is mental search, and this proved to be good enough to write chess programs and beat the world chess champion, but it didn't generalize to more general human capabilities. Other things are kind of uses of logic or Bayesian reasoning, and all of these were also had problems. So the capability, which is really what all of the current AI, which is celebrated, is based on, is the capability for learning from examples, which I'll say a lot more about later on. It's a capability which we can define and also has proved useful in producing human-like behavior. But this is probably not enough. So how adequate? So what's this hold up about as far as understanding ourselves, understanding our capabilities? Well, probably intelligence is the word which comes to mind as far as human capabilities. But you know, how much do we understand this word? So when we measure our capabilities, we call it an intelligence quotient. When we attempt to emulate our mental faculties, we call it artificial intelligence. People fear that machines more intelligent than humans would be an existential threat. And in searching the cosmos, we are seeking intelligent life. So we seem to be obsessed with intelligence, but do we know what intelligence is? Well, when a distinguished committee came together to find out, their conclusion was that when 24 prominent theorists were recently asked to define intelligence, they gave 24 somewhat different answers. And this is somewhat disturbing. So this is the American Psychological Association, who were prompted to investigate this because of controversial aspects of of IQ tests. So intelligence is a problematic notion which we can't define. In a very simple sense, what I'll discuss is whether we can replace intelligence by some notion which is more useful. So that's basically my subject today. So how should we ask this question? Well, I've asked it in a way which I find interesting, and I've written a book about it. So this is the book. There's an author and also a title, which is omitted, but the main point is the cover designer's work. So the arrow on the bottom is not a cursor on my computer, but it's a picture of a cursor. And the arrow on the top is a Stone Age arrow. So the question I'm asking here is, what human capability enabled humans to go from the Stone Age a few tens of thousands of years ago to the modern age? And the answer most probably isn't a biological change. So people have looked for sweeps of the human population, some genetic mutation which has swept through the whole population, which may in the spirit have changed us. None has been found. Of course, there are more subtle biological changes possible, but it's also quite likely that we had some capability from the beginning as a species, which just took a long time to be fully realized, and that's the kind of approach which I'm taking here. So I'm looking for cognitive capability, which enabled humans to go from the Stone Age life to our modern technological life. And I'm looking at this from a computational viewpoint. Oops. Okay. So I'm looking for this capability. I call it the civilization enabler. It's a capability. And the computational viewpoint has two parts. One is that I want this capability to be kind of well-defined functionally. When you exercise this capability, what do you change? What's the change? And also that this can't be just a wish list of arbitrary capabilities. It has to be something which is computationally feasible. So there has to be some explanation of how this would be done on a machine or in a brain. So what is this civilization enabler? Of course, this question has been asked by many communities, and in fact, you can find one website which lists 617 different topics which academics have researched where humans differ from our close relatives. But I'm looking for something specific. I'm looking for a cognitive capability which not only makes us different, but also enables us to plausibly to have developed our civilization. So, for example, eyebrows, apparently unique to humans. No theory of why eyebrows enable us to go to the moon. Animal domestication, again, probably very important in our history, but again, no explanation of why, if you can domesticate animals, then you can build computers. Various other important aspects humans have, biological, behavioral, but none of these by itself seems to offer an explanation of why we do what we do. So intelligence, as I said, good word, we don't know what it means. So symbols, language, so that gets closer clearly to unique human capabilities. But again, just by saying that language, you can teach an ape language in some sense, but just talking isn't enough. We have some other capabilities which enabled us to process information in the ways we do, and that's what we want to capture. So language may be an aspect of it, an essential aspect, but it's not, doesn't answer the question. Okay, so I'll tell you what my proposal is. The main point, it's a computational model, which is described in moderate amount of detail, and is computationally realizable. And so it's a composite, and I call it educability. And the name is intended to recall what the real-world phenomenon is. So the idea is that we're basically machines which are ready to be educated in a broad sense. So this capability is a composite, And I'll first informally define it and then go into details by what I mean by each aspect. So the first aspect is the ability to learn from experience, to generalize from experience, to acquire some belief from experience. And by this, I mean exactly what is successful in machine learning now. So this we know from experience can already produce complex human-like behavior, like nice, smooth sentences, for example, as in large language models. But I don't think this is everything. So the second aspect of this model is that once we've learned from experience, we can also do some simple reasoning and application of what we've learned. So this is applying what we've learned in combination. We learn two things, and we can apply one, then the other, to specific situations. So this is both simple reasoning and also applying. So the idea is that we just don't only just learn things which sit in our brain like in a copying machine. We have circuits which are ready to apply it. And the third aspect is that instead of just learning from experience, we can acquire beliefs from other people which the other people have learned from experience. So we don't need to spend all the time having their experiences. So this is acquiring beliefs which are described to us, say, in words. So if you sit in a lecture room, you go to a course in quantum physics, this is what you're doing. You're acquiring beliefs from other people. The beliefs are explicitly given, but these beliefs were arrived at by other people at enormous cost of experiments, experience, and what have you. So this is the way we share culture. And each of these three parts doesn't make much sense unless you describe the domain in which you're able to do this. It has to be rich enough, and I'll say a bit more about this in a second. So it has to be in a domain where we can distinguish objects, discuss relations among them, somewhat like it's done for example, in the practical calculus and logic. Okay, so I won't say too much about educational philosophy, but clearly in educational philosophy, people talk about certainly learning by instruction, which is part 3. People complain that that's a bit dry, not enough. It's also good to learn from experience. So that's 1, be hands-on. And number 2 is that we just don't absorb knowledge, but we also learn to apply it in situations. So applying knowledge is number 2. So at a very basic level, this does hit some basic points in educational philosophy. The idea is not to argue which one is the most important, but to acknowledge that they're all essential. So I don't need to speculate exactly on evolutionarily how this capability came about in humans, but if you just want a speculation, the idea is that a very basic generalization has been there from the probably beginning of life, adaptation, animals moving to light if they think there's food there. Once you can do that, also applying in combination seems very natural, and I'm sure that was acquired very early on. So the specifically human part is being able to in this broad context, acquire beliefs explicitly described by others. So to date so our species is usually dated to about 300,000 years ago, and most likely this ability was in place already at the beginning of our species. So maybe in some predecessor species in the last 3 million years it somehow got together. But again, probably the last step of this was evolutionary, probably not so complicated. Anyway, so there's a general idea of what may have happened. Okay, so generalization from experience. So this I take on standard machine learning, which has been successful. And as most of you know, generalization from experience is about having a learning algorithm which takes training examples, for example, pictures labeled as elephant or not elephant, and then producing a classifier. And this classifies some sort of program or network, and then you can use these classifiers afterwards to classify new examples which you don't know whether they're elephants or not, and this will predict the label. Okay, so this is learning from experience. And also what we know is important, both in theory and practice, is that the examples have to come from some world, some distribution, and if you want this to work well, then what you test has to come from the same world. So you have to somehow locate the source of your data, otherwise this doesn't work. But if you do locate the data, then it can work amazingly well. All this, in this book, I suggest a fairly concrete theoretical implementation. I'll quickly try to justify that. So for generalization, this is the probably approximately correct model of learning, which roughly says that in this blue circle are all the possibly infinite number of different possible pictures you can see. Some are truly elephants, some are truly not elephants. So the solid line separates this some sort of ground truth. So your classifier which you learn will inevitably make mistakes in a complex world, and you want to make the mistakes small. And the point of this model is that, in fact, both in theory and in practice, you can expect to have fairly high expectations for the errors. The more effort you make in learning, the effort being both examples you collect and computational steps you do, you can expect to reduce the error. And in fact, you can expect to reduce it as some constant, algebraically as some constant power. And so the more effort you make, you want to do better, but also affordably so. So if you make even more effort, you want to be well rewarded. So for example, in particular, if you make 10 times more effort and you halve the error, then if you make 10 times more effort, even that, then you expect to halve the error again. And this is partly the reason why people spend millions of dollars on training like these large language models, because if you double your expenditure, you do get a sizable improvement in the error. So this is a strong phenomenon. So this model, I should emphasize, it formalizes just generalization, that you can classify new examples accurately. The advantage of looking at formal models is that it doesn't give you false expectations. So people, if you just talk about supervised learning, which is a rough, informal way of saying the same thing, then you're easily led into complaining that what you're getting fails in some expectations which humans can do. So some people complain that explainability, that your network doesn't explain why it's doing things. Adversarial examples that you can easily trick, classify with carefully chosen examples to mislead it. So these are things which aren't promised by theory. They're not promised by the way these algorithms are developed. There are things extra, you may have to do extra things to attain this. It's important when you define a capability to define it fairly precisely so it's not misunderstood to expect too much more. Okay, so large language models, much discussed, are trained to predict the next token, which is like a syllable, and that's all that's promised. Of course, people ask whether large language models do more, and that's up for debate. Okay, so that's the first part of the educability definition. So the second part is some sort of reasoning, applying beliefs in combination. And so already Aristotle made this claim that if you acquire a belief, it comes either from syllogism or induction, which in modern terms you'd say is reasoning or machine learning. And basically this approach here is saying that you should have a balance between the two. You shouldn't give too much emphasis to one or the other. And the emphasis here is on the phenomenon that the information you've learned from experience is uncertain, so how on earth do you reason with it? The problem being that most reasoning systems people have developed in classical logic are very deterministic, and not suitable for errors. So in the second part, there's a definition I have, which I pursued for a long time, for putting together learned knowledge, which I call robust logic. So very roughly, what goes on is that this is a supervised learning box. This is just having supervised learning, nothing else. So the next stage is to have many of these boxes. For example, each box may learn to recognize a different word in the English language. So we, in our brains, may have different recognizers for different concepts. But the extra thing we get is that we can also chain together. We can do reasoning where we chain together conclusions of these various boxes given a situation. So in standard learning, we get some generalization guarantees, as I've shown with my graph. When you do logic, you want something extra, which is what I call soundness guarantees, which roughly in this context mean that if you have two rules and you chain them together, like A implies B, B implies C, if each rule is uncertain, you want some guarantee on what happens when you chain them together. So for example, if you chain together two rules which are supported by data to 99%, then you want some guarantee that when you chain them together, you get something. You may get 98%. Okay. And so I won't describe robust logic in great detail, but very roughly the idea is that you can also describe the world. So you wake up, you think of your dog. In your brain, you've got these tokens, which are just undifferentiated. So you think of your dog, you wonder what your dog likes, but in your mind, you've got some things you've learned, and you may have learned that dogs like bones, okay? So your mind may think of a bone. So a logical rule would look like this, but we're not doing logic now, we're doing uncertain things. So in robust logic, a rule would be a classifier, like a neural net, okay? And so the logical rule, the way in which you'd store this information that dogs like bones would be that on the right-hand side, you would be predicting when what you're looking at is a bone. But on the left-hand side is some big neural net, for example, is some predictor, a classifier, which classifies all the instances in which what you're thinking about is a bone. Okay? It's like having these different classifiers in your brain, one for each word in the English language. And these rules you can use for chaining together. These are equivalences, different from logic, which basically means that in machine learning, when you learn to predict an elephant, you try to predict when it's really an elephant, you also try to predict when it's not an elephant. So in the learning framework, you need equivalences. It's a bit different from standard logic, but one tries to mimic the benefits you get from logic. Okay, so so if you do this, then some of the complaints about pure learning from examples, you can start discussing. So for example, explainability. So instead of trying to dig out some explanation of what this network is doing, what we're saying is that if you're learning, you've got many recognition boxes, one for each word in the English language, and you make a decision, then your explanation would be, your analysis of the situation. You wouldn't have to go into the network and dig something new out. You would just reveal what your analysis is. So the third part is of this definition of educability is taking instruction from others, which means that so once we've built up the infrastructure for what I've described up to now, basic learning from examples and chaining together, and this mind's eye for analyzing situations, what else do we do? Well, we have this ability to also to incorporate in all this infrastructure some recipe or program or instructions which someone has given us. So we go to a course on quantum mechanics, people tell us how to do a calculation, we can do it. We don't have to learn that from experience. And so educability is the realization of all these things. Okay, so so clearly the upside of the last thing we've added is that we can share knowledge efficiently, which other animals cannot. Discovery is painfully made from experience by many people. You can just share in a classroom. So certainly the development of science is totally based on this, that you can learn in a classroom the contributions of thousands of scientists. So this is the mystery of how you get this technological civilization where a large amount of knowledge can be spread to large populations, and it enables us to do all the things we do in our civilization. But there are lots of issues to discuss, and so I'll discuss one for now. So what's the downside of this recent human capability? Well, the observation is that without taking programs from other people, the first two aspects are very grounded in experience. So we learn from experience, we learn how to find food, where to find food, so we adapt to the world. So it's grounded in the world. So what we learn, presumably, is good for us. And also, if we chain together things in the world in a principled way, then presumably it's well adapted to the world. But what happens if we can do the third thing? So we've got this enormous capability for absorbing instruction without any capability for verifying its truth, validity, or reality. So what I've described, there's no capability for really checking out. So if I teach you some theory of politics, you have a capability for processing it, for relating it to what you know, but I haven't told you anything on how you should evaluate whether it's a good theory of politics. And I think this is a real truth, that our abilities to process information far outstrips our abilities to analyze it for ourselves. So we're easily victims of arbitrary belief systems, ideologies, conspiracy theories. So in some sense, we don't even care so much. We read fiction, and whether it's fact or fiction isn't so important to us. We're entertained, and we don't really care so much on whether some story is just true or false. That's not what we're hung up about. So as far as some action item, so the obvious one here is that maybe we need some protection to harden ourselves against propaganda, both traditional and digital. So there's much discussion now of the dangers of digital fakes. But I'd suggest the danger is much deeper than that. We're just very bad at evaluating all realities given to us even by traditional means. We can be easily fooled. Digital fakes are just a new medium. So this is, I think, a serious problem which we may have to address. Some education for safety against propaganda, which may be particularly relevant if we are living in an age where all this information is flowing around us. So, so pictorially, this is what it looks like. That there's this, if you want a pictorial, that's the world, complicated environment. So our ancestors in evolution did things which are well fitted to the world. They learned from the world, and they reasoned on the world. But now we've got this additional ability to just acquire some arbitrary program divorced from the world, which gives us enormous power to think about science, think about all kinds of things, philosophy, but it's not grounded in reality, and that causes us many problems. So that's the name of the book. It's a Princeton University Press book. But just to finish off, so I've got one more slide which raises four issues which each could take a long discussion. So this by definition, by the name of the definition, I really want to address this issue of education. So this definition suggests that education is really central to humans. It's not just something we do for a few years. And just one comment. So once one formulates something for computers, sometimes we take it more seriously than we do it for humans. So for example, now that some computers make decisions about accepting you for jobs, people get worried about fairness, and people are upset about machines not being fair, whereas when humans made the same decisions, people weren't so upset. So maybe if we discuss computers being educated, we'd be also upset that education we regard very much as a very pragmatic thing, which we do without much of a scientific basis. So maybe if this encourages education to develop more of a scientific basis, I think that would be good. Okay, so item 2. So we know that we believe that Turing machines are kind of the most powerful model of computation, except possibly for efficiency. There's the issue of whether this model is kind of the most powerful of its kind. So if we believe it is, let's hypothesize it is, then I think it does have consequences for this argument of singularity. So some people are worried that super intelligent computers will take over. But if we look at ourselves as our main capabilities as being understood ordinary processes, learning, training, acquiring programs, executing programs, then it may be that machines can do this more efficiently, but there's no mysterious superpower which we have to be afraid of. Okay, that's a long discussion there. And then lastly, so there's a fairly concrete notion of what educability is. So going back to humans, there's a question of whether we can make humans more educable than they are. Of course, this is learning to learn is much discussed, but this is a much more concrete proposal. So very roughly, if you want to test for how educable someone is, say in an exam, then you would be really testing for, you have some experience during the exam, and you'd be testing only for what they've acquired during the exam. You'd be very careful not to test for anything which happened before. You're not testing for skills, you're not testing for previous knowledge, you're testing for what they've acquired in any of these 3 ways during the exam. So it's possible, it may be possible to test for educability, it may be possible to enhance a population's educability. Okay, thank you.
Well, there was a very exciting talk, right? And I like it a lot that this notion of educability is very applicable to our idea of human intelligence and the human experience, and it also captures what we want in machine intelligence, or it is what we envision machine intelligence to be. Right? You did mention about large language models. Right? Maybe I can start off with a quick question. Right, that might be on some of our minds, right? So large language models, they can do a lot of things, right? But they do hallucinate. Like, what are your thoughts on the educability of large language models, and how do hallucinations come into the picture?
Yeah, well, large language models are trained to predict the next token, the next syllable, and that they do superbly well. That's why they create this very smooth sentences, but that's all that's promised. Anything else is not promised by the way they're made. So certainly there's no principled reason to believe that they can reason in any way. When people say they hallucinate, they're being very generous, saying that you're very intelligent, but you're just making a slight mistake. But in fact, there's no reason to believe that they can reason in a generic sense. Often they do get reasoning right, and one can understand the different ways they may get that. So they may have learned various patterns of reasoning, which they apply irregularly. And also, if you somehow unroll the reasoning, make it step by step, then the reasoning steps are kind of out there explicitly in the argument. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they reason, but there's no one should take the advice of a large language model for a life critical decision.
So there are still limitations in the reasoning capability. Right?
Yes.
And any thoughts on future large language models, like how to make them reason better?
Well, I mean, you could do the same thing with already with large language models. Of course, people put enormous emphasis on the training set, on the very carefully curated and human trainers. So you can make things better than that. But what I'm suggesting here is a different architecture where you don't just make one big training thing, but you train many networks and have some principled reasoning. So there are other ways of building systems than having one huge network.
Precisely, yes. I do see some people in the audience. Let's go ahead with you over there.
Hi, thank you for the interesting talk. I wanted to, you mentioned that the civilization enabler being like maybe at the educability, but I wanted to hear your thoughts about like, what about like our like curiosity? Like we kind of like we investigate, we create, we use the educability to answer the questions we ask.
Well, these may all be very essential aspects of what we do, but if you just make a machine which is, you try to define curiosity in some sense, make a machine which is curious, and by itself it wouldn't build up all this knowledge which we have. So one has to capture the basic ways. I want to capture the basic ways in which we acquire and process information. So you know, I'm clearly missing out many aspects which are important to be creative, but you know, curiosity, for example, I think it by itself isn't enough. Many animals are curious as well, you know, so I don't think it serves the purpose I'm looking for here.
Okay, let's go with the lady.
Thank you. I'm Jitske. I'm a structural biologist in Amsterdam. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on accountability. Because you mentioned the example that people don't think it's fair sometimes if a computer makes a decision, whereas for a human, they would not give it a second thought. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
So I don't think this has. So I made the point in connection with education that I think a bit like making decisions about people being fair, we do it very informally. I mean, humans do it; no one knows what's going on, and we can't complain. And I think education we do in a similar way at the moment. It's very much best practices. Everyone in the education world makes enormous efforts at teaching well, but we all have different ideas of what education is. And the idea of a science of education has been discussed for a long time, but it's not really a successful idea. So I'm hoping that trying to model educability in a computational way will make people worry more about how badly we approach education at the moment. So it's accountability in this sense that for some curious reason we want computers to account for themselves better than we account for things individually, just because we've written down what we're doing explicitly, and people can argue whether is this good education, is this fair. So I think it's in this sense that I think computational models seem to make us more accountable.
Thank you.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah, hi, my name is Yong Ray, and I'm a theoretical chemist at UC San Diego. So I understand that you listed a set of criteria that defines a civilization, one of which being logic, like reasoning, and you wish to include that in an AI model. So I'm wondering how you model something that is more human, like the humanities, like the performing arts or the entertainment industry, politics. Like I imagine these things also shape a civilization, but it's not something that you can necessarily rationalize. Well,
I'm not sure. Maybe you can. So I'm suggesting that our basic ways in which we acquire knowledge, we learn things from experience, we can chain things together, we can apply our experience to situations, and we also we can pick up very complicated information from other people, and this is what we mix up in our brain. So I'm not quite sure, I think, well, whether you're a scientist or a humanist or an artist, you may be using similar thought processes.
I see. So you believe that most things in civilization can be made logical?
Well, by logical, so don't misinterpret the way I use the word logic. So, so my logic is a kind of very weak logic. It deals with uncertainty. I haven't described the various aspects of it, but for example, the system doesn't guarantee consistency. So in the system, you have these beliefs which are approximately true, and you never know whether they're in conflict in any situation. So they're very permissive. So to me, they don't look more science-oriented than humanities-oriented, particularly. It's a very permissive kind of logic, where nevertheless, you've got some guarantees that if you chain things together, it makes some sense. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Over there, yeah.
Hi, I'm Farha Jala from the Vienna Biocenter in Austria, and thanks a lot for the very interesting talk. I wonder whether the flaws in educability in humans are actually what make us humans. And I think about it for example, if you think about evolution, you have many modifications or mutations, and this opens different pathways, and this allows evolution to go towards paths that are not essential or not planned. So the flaws and the mistakes and the errors in humanity maybe are important for distinguishing us from machines. So I don't know, what are your thoughts towards that?
So certainly in one sense, I'm saying that what we're good at is acquiring other people's beliefs, and so this makes us liable to make lots of mistakes. So in fact, we can't. It's very hard to keep our thoughts under control without making mistakes. So the model has some parameters I haven't mentioned. So for example, if you want to make an educable machine independently and have it sit there, one thing you have to put in, which I've mentioned, is that you need some criterion of whom to believe. So if people tell you various theories, do you believe everybody or do you not? So we all have some heuristics. Psychologists discuss heuristics humans have to decide whom to believe. So we may believe our parents most when we're small. So when we go to college, we're taught, what are reliable sources of information, so which are the good journals. So we need many ways to make sure that what we learn is reliable. I think we've got a serious problem in keeping our thoughts on track, and we can make mistakes in a million ways. Yes, it's a feature of educability, I think.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we are running a bit short of time, right? And let me conclude that basically this educability, right? This is a good framework to think about such questions of machine intelligence, about educating machines, like making them reason, making them accountable. Like I'm sure you have a lot of questions, like, and you can always ask Leslie, like during the breaks, if you want. Yeah. And that's it for this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.